Hey guys, this is Patrick with MT Knives coming to you today with today's Expert Counsel segment of the week. Today we're going to talk about choosing the right knife, and just there's so many different options out there on the market. How does somebody pick and choose, narrow down a knife for themselves? So like I said, there's a lot of different options out there on knives to use. The thing about knives is there's a lot of factors that come into what makes a good knife. And primarily, I'm concerned with how's the knife going to perform. You got different personal preferences on how, a knife looks, on how big it is, how small it is. For choosing the proper knife or the correct knife, it's going to also depend on what you plan on doing with the knife. For instance, somebody just sent me a picture of an ulu. I think that's how you say it. It's a popular knife that you'll see in like tourist shops in Alaska and stuff. It's a curved blade, much like kind of like a half moon shape. It's got a handle on top, and the way you use it is typically you'll have a cutting board that's a bowl shape, and then you can put your herbs or whatever in there and use the rocking motion to dice up stuff or cut up stuff. I think they're neat. I think they're neat looking. I think for certain applications, they're great for the job. However, they're kind of unique and they're only good for a certain thing, like a certain amount of things. Now, if it's the only tool that you had, like, I wouldn't not want to have it if I didn't have a knife. But for most everyday knife tasks, especially like in the kitchen, I can see it having its place, but it's kind of its own little niche of tool. I could see having it. It's just not really a tool that I personally have in my kitchen. It doesn't mean that it's not the right tool for you. So take whatever I say with a grain of salt. It's free advice. You're more than happy to do what you feel. But for me personally, I don't have one. If you like them, great. I tend to try to make something that I feel personally is useful. And because here's the thing. So a lot of times we end up buying something because it's unique, or, especially like there's a reason that knife is very popular as like a touristy type thing. Is people are on vacation, they, they're doing something that's fun, and they want something to remember their trip from. So they want to pick up something. And it's a lot easier to kind of justify it in your mind of like, hey, that's neat, that's useful. And then a lot of times we end up accumulating all this stuff that we never use. I personally like to limit the things that take up space, clutter, and quite frankly are just things that I don't use every day. Part of the reason I love a neck knife is it's always with me. It gets used every day, and it is just something that I use every single day. Every day, if I didn't have one, I'd be reaching for it. And so having a tool like that, I know that it's worth having. If you have a tool that just sits in a drawer or on your counter for months at a time without you using it, it's not a very useful tool. So how do you pick the right knife? I believe that a great knife for people to have is an everyday carry, something that you have with you at all times that's going to be used for everyday tasks, opening boxes, opening things, cutting a string, digging out a splinter, cleaning your nails, just whatever you might use it for. I think that a person should have an everyday carry. And the saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Sometimes it's nice to carry 2 knives, one maybe in your pocket, one around your neck, wherever. And what that allows you to do is you can have one knife that you do maybe abusive stuff with, but you can have another knife that you keep nice and sharp in case you need a really sharp knife. Then, as far as like everyday use, kitchen knives. In the kitchen, I think every kitchen needs 2-3 good knives. You need a good chef's knife, 8-9 inch chef's knife, something good for, processing food. And then everybody needs a good paring knife, something smaller, good for like peeling things, slicing, things. Those are the two main ones that I use in the kitchen. A lot of times my neck knife might actually be used for food prep, but a paring knife, nice small thin knife, cuts really good. An 8-inch chef's knife, and then it's nice to have some sort of cleaver or something like that if you want to do some heavy chopping. Okay. From there, if you're into like outdoor stuff, obviously if you're a fisherman, something like that, you need it's good to have a fillet knife. A fillet knife is one of those tools that you don't use all the time, but having the right tool for the right job, it's really nice to have a good fillet knife. And then as far as like if you're an outdoorsman, hunter, bushcrafter, it's good to have a knife that's good for processing game, skinning animals, breaking it down. And in this is an area where I think a lot of people tend to go big, and then over time you realize that you don't really need a very big knife, even to process something like an elk or a beef even. I've worked at meat lockers. I've processed my own animals, cows, chickens, you name it, deer. And this knife here will do everything that I need it to do and get the job done, including separating the backbone, breaking down, quartering. It's all about having a sharp knife and knowing how to use it. And then, let's see. So we kind of covered, bushcrafting. Now, in bushcrafting, I could see having a larger knife. I could see having something thicker, 1/4 inch thick, nice Scandi grind, with the main idea of like, I might be batoning wood, splitting down, processing lumber, where you need something a little bit bigger that you're not going to break, that you can beat on and abuse. But realistically, most people aren't doing that kind of stuff with their knife. And anytime it comes to using a knife, the thinner you can have it, the sharper you can have it, the better it is. The only reason you'd want a thick blade is for like heavy use work where you're going to be doing stuff that really is kind of abusive to blades. And at some point you need to ask yourself, well, do I have the right tool for the job? Let's take butchering an animal, for example. There's times where having a cleaver to like cleave through bone is good to have. And there's times that having just a saw is the right tool for the job. If you're going to saw through bones, that's what I would suggest. But a knife can process down animals, especially splitting joints, dividing asunder bone and marrow. A knife and being sharp will do what you need it to do. So there you have it. That's kind of my 2 cents on knives. And then I guess too, we'll talk about collectible knives or something that we just like is cool. So a lot of times people are buying knives because they like knives. They like to collect them. They like the way they look. They like these specialty steels. They like, titanium and these different colors and shapes and all designs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's a neat way another way to kind of be expressive or unique, having a knife that is cool and not something very common, and that just, personal taste. Butterfly knives are cool. People do tricks with them. But, at some point, I guess having that clear defining line of what are you looking for? What purpose is this knife serving for you? And if it's just a collectible knife or something that you find neat or like the way it looks, great. I just want to caution people to be thoughtful in your purchases. And you know, a lot of times people buy a knife, because they buy the marketing, right, or they buy the advertisements, and they think, oh man, I got to have this knife, I got to have, you know, this is cool, and you know, whatever. And but at the end of the day, when you get it and the coolness wears off, if it's not something that has a function that is, if it's not something that brings value, then you're going to regret buying that knife. And so I guess that's what I would try to caution you on is, and I've done it. I've bought things that I really thought I wanted, and at the end of the day, it wasn't something practical. And I've had that in the earlier years of making knives. I had customers come to me with an idea of what they wanted for a custom knife, and you know, I made it for them. They loved it. Time went on, and they fell out of love with it. And a lot of that is because their design was neat, but it wasn't really functional or useful. And so I like to make knives that are functional, useful, and have a purpose, because then people are going to want to carry it. They're going to want to have it. And when they don't have it, they're going to feel like something's missing when they don't have it. And I think that that's what makes a good product, is something that is it looks good, it feels good, and it's useful. So that's kind of where I go. I hope this has been insightful, and I hope it helps you to navigate these decisions on, you know, what knife should you buy, and so on and so forth. This has been Patrick Rohrman with MT Knives. Stay sharp.